It's a storybook of God's interaction with mankind. It's a storybook that has good stories in it, and ugly stories in it, and heartbreaking stories in it, and heart-wrenching stories in it, and stories of hope and joy. It's the story of creation and fall, and redemption and restoration. You know, the Bible hides nothing. I was looking this week, and the person I was reading said, you know, it hides nothing. It even tells, when Moses put together that, talked about Abraham. Do you know what Abraham did? I'll guarantee you, if you did what Abraham did, your wife would never go back to you. He allowed and said, I want you to go sleep with Pharaoh. You marry her. Do you know that's there? Doesn't hide anything. And throughout the story, you can see the continual story of people walking with God and people falling in sin, and God's always interaction with people and trying to bring people back to Him. The good news of the gospel is God never turns His back on us, even though we may turn our back on Him. He's always there, desiring, hoping that we'll come to Him. That's why the story of the prodigal son's there. That's how much God loves us. Stories are powerful, and real life stories can be powerful. They can change minds, they can touch hearts, impact lives. They can even reshape societies. Take, for this example, the story of a hard-living, liquor-slogging, vulgarity-spewing sea captain of a slave ship in the 1700s, who in the midst of a terrible storm cried out for God for deliverance amidst the waves, and mercifully he received it. His name was John Newton, and he told of how that experience was used by God to dramatically reorient his life and perspective, including his views on slavery. And he wrote a song that we all love, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was blind, but now I see. I once was lost, but now I'm found. His story became influence on the life of another guy a century later named William Wilberforce, who succeeded in abolishing slavery in the British Empire. And here's a story you might not know of. It happened in the 1950s, though I think you probably have heard something of its results. A young missionary named Bob Pierce felt such compassion for a young Chinese girl's widowed mother who could not afford to send her child to a mission school, so he gave money to help. All he had at the time was $15. That was enough to enroll her in school, and he committed sending money every month for the continued support. When he went back to America, he began telling others of his story and what things he had seen in Asia and what he had done to help this girl. The concept of sponsorship caught on and began to grow. Today, that organization is World Vision. Has over 500,000 people sponsoring children every month, supporting 100 million people in 99 countries, and it's become one of the largest relief agencies in the world. Stories are powerful. And you have a story, and I have a story. And I've been listening to your stories and the things that you say and your interaction with God, and I've been deeply touched by that. See, sharing our stories is one of the most powerful things we can do in being sharers of the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's why in the Bible in 1 Peter 3:15 we read, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who ask you to give the reason for the hope you have. You think there are a lot of hopeless people around you? And they see hope in you? We are to be prepared to give an answer. And as genuine followers of Jesus Christ, we all have stories. Stories of our walking with God, our falling away with God, our coming back to God, of God's presence and how He has worked in and through the lives of other people and through our lives. Our testimonies can be absolutely powerful. Chuck Swindoll said in his book, Come Before Winter, the skeptic may deny your doctrine or attack your church, but he cannot ignore the fact that your life has been changed. A couple of months ago, Donna Smith came to me after service, and she had an envelope, had my name on it. It was sealed. She said, I'm going to share what you said. Is that okay, Donna? Yeah. She said, I have something I want to share with you. I've never felt like sharing this with another pastor, but I feel like sharing this with you. And I said, well, I'll read this with interest. And I didn't know what I was going to read. And I went and studied and opened up, and I read part of her story of God's presence in her life. And a couple of weeks later, I said, Donna, would you be willing to share this on a Sunday morning? She said yes. So, Donna, will you come and share that beautiful story of God's presence in your life?
Thank you. Good morning. My story starts when, shortly after I was born, my mother was told that I was blind. And she was also told that I had cataracts that would never grow, so she was told that there would be no reason to remove them. She was also told at other great lengths that the other eye problems that I had. So she took me home, and her, my grandmother, and my aunt got down on their hands and knees, laid hands on me, and prayed. My mother prayed for me, for God to heal my eyes and to give me sight. Shortly after that, it was apparent that I had some sight because I could follow direction and not just by voice. Later on, I could see some, but not very well. And the doctors told my mother that I would never learn how to read, that I would never learn my colors, I would never learn how to do very much at all. They never gave her any hope at all of me ever doing anything. Being blessed with the mother that I was blessed with, she kept working with me and never gave up. And eventually I did learn my colors. So I do know my colors. When it came time for me to start school, they told my mother that I would need to go to a school for the blind and the deaf. My mother put me in public school. Now, public school was very hard for me because a lot of times they did not know what to do with me because I had such a visual impairment that they'd never had before. They'd never come in contact with. So a lot of times they said, well, never mind, just don't do it. Or they did it for me. So it was very hard, and it was an uphill battle. But I was doing it, and I kept going. And at 16, those cataracts that were never supposed to grow started to grow. And the first cataract I had removed in Lumberton, North Carolina. And I could see better. Then the next one I had removed in Southern Pines, North Carolina. And I could see even better. Then, because I couldn't use contact lenses, they put lenses on the insides of my eyes, which was a long process. And after the process was done, walking out of the doctor's office one day, the trees, I knew they were green. They cast black shadows. So the trees that were black were green. And I saw a bird fly for the very first time. On the way home, I couldn't take in God's world fast enough. All the trees were bright. All the colors were so bright. They had no film over them. They were not blurry. They were sharp and clear. So I'd like to just pass along one thing. The next time that you are in such a hurry, stop and take a minute and look at God's world. Because somebody cannot see what you're seeing. But I'd like to take you back to when I was in school just a moment. I was told by a 5th grade teacher that I would never make it past 6th grade, not to think about high school or college, which is a terrible thing to tell a child. Well, little did she know that a year before that, I had asked Jesus to come into my heart. And I thought about her, and I looked at her, and I thought, you just wait. You just wait and see what I'll do. So not only did I make it past the 6th grade, I graduated from high school. I have a BS degree in social work. I have an associate's degree in medical transcription. I was able to move out of my parents' home. I was able to obtain a driver's license. I worked 26 years in child care. 10 of those years I worked as a director of a child care center. I prayed for so long to have a child of my own. And people would always tell me, what in the world do you want a child of your own for? You can give them back at 5:30. Are you crazy? I said, well, I must be crazy because I want one of my own. So I became a foster parent. And what doesn't happen very often happened. The first child that was placed in my home, I was able to adopt. So in God's own time, He gave me a child of my own. And I have to add something to this. As she grew, she obtained a great love for horses. And she fell off of a horse and was stepped on by that horse and ended up in a wheelchair. And I was devastated, and so was my family. And I just knew she couldn't stay in that wheelchair. It just couldn't happen. So we started praying, and I prayed. And I just knew she could not stay in that wheelchair. She just couldn't. And a month later, she came out of that wheelchair and started walking again. But not everything is all sunshine and roses. There were times when I couldn't pay my rent. I thought we were going to be homeless. My lights got cut off. My water got cut off. I went through a whole winter without heat. I went through a whole year without hot water. Sometimes I didn't know where my food was coming from. I would go without eating so my child could eat. I had to voluntary repo both my cars. Didn't know how I was going to get back and forth to work. I prayed, God, if you please, just make me financially stable so I could just pay my bills, just please. I don't want to be rich. I just want to be stable. But still we struggled, and I kept going. And then one day somebody suggested to me, your situation would be so much better if you would just call Habitat for Humanity. And I thought about that. And I thought, well, you know what? It won't do me any good to call because I'll make too much money. Even though we don't have anything, and it would make things better, I'll make too much money. But then something kept tugging at me, and I thought, well, I'll give it a try. So I called, and I filled out an application, and I was told, there are 40 people ahead of you. And I thought, 40 people? There is no way. But then I got to praying about that, and I thought, God knows what we need, and we need a house. Well, I kept praying. And then I got a phone call. And then I got another phone call. Then I got an interview. Then I got another phone call. Then there was more talking. Then there was a home visit. Then through this long process I went through, I was told, you're getting the next Habitat house. We went from 40 to 1 on that list. And there was no doubt in my mind that God had answered my prayers. I've been living in that house for 4 years. And in God's own time, I have become financially stable. So there is no doubt in my mind that God answers prayer and that God is with you no matter what you are going through. And if, in answer to the question, when is the last time that you could say, God did that? My whole life has been, God did that. Thank you.
Amen. A beautiful story, isn't it? Of just keeping on, trusting regardless what comes your way. Thank you, Donna. It's one of the most beautiful stories and encouragement. And thank you for sharing that with me and your willingness to share it here. Do you know what people need most in our culture today? They need to see people who can say, God answers prayer. This is how God has worked in my life. Your story powerfully illustrates to people what God is doing. They can refute everything else, but they can't refute your story. It's interesting, through the years in our structures, churches, we've had a lot of evangelism training, particularly in the 70s and 80s. Anybody been to evangelism training on how to share the gospel? You know, one of the things that we haven't taught people is how to share your story. We taught them the Roman road, we taught them all kinds of ways, and as I read Scripture, some are given the gift of evangelism. But Jesus said we shall all be witnesses. And what does a witness do? A witness could only share what he personally or she personally knows, sees, or has experienced. It cannot be somebody else. It's what has been done and lived in through our lives. People respond to our stories. And I have loved listening to your stories. This morning, Jimmy People shared a story of God's presence this week. And a very tearful thing of something God did and to help a lady that he happened to be part of that was powerful. Have you shared your story? Do you talk about God, or do you talk about your life with God? People need to hear your story of where your life has interacted with God and how he has seen you through. All of us have stories. We go through good times and we go through rough times, and we also become prodigals and we return, and God is always there loving, and we need to share stories. Can you share your story? I'd love to hear your stories. Share your stories in your classes. Share your stories with people. When you come upon an opportunity and somebody's going through a rough time, maybe God has given you a story to share. This person, Jimmy, was going through a rough time, and he just shared how God saw him through his heart attack and what God did in that. And that person, 2 days later, said, "Thank you, I now have hope." Share your stories. Many of our hymns we sing come out of a person's journey with God. Do you realize that? They're stories. And such is the case with the hymn we're getting ready to sing, "I Love to Tell the Story." Shouldn't we all love to tell the story? Catherine Hankey, the author of these words, was raised in a Christian home, and she organized Sunday school classes for the poor and disadvantaged. And at 30 years of age in 1866, she suffered a serious illness, and she went through an extended period of recovery. And while she convalesced, she wrote a lengthy poem on the life of Christ. The first section was composed of 50 verses. And those verses gave us the hymn, "Tell Me the Old, Old Story." It was titled, "The Story Wanted," and the second section was titled, "The Story Told." And out of that became this song, "I Love to Tell the Story." And it became a hit when a guy in Philadelphia by the name of the Fisher put it to piano. Do you love to tell your story of what Jesus has done? Can't we brag on him a little bit? Can't we let people know, not that we are special, but that God is God and he loves every single one of us, and he wants his story to live out in and through our lives, where we become a people that do not judge, that do not condemn, that love, that we never give up hope for anybody. Because sometimes, somewhere along the way, a person's going to unplug their ears and they will hear this story because somebody like you and me have told that story. Can you tell Jesus today in worship, "I love to tell the story"? Can that become our confession together? If there's any decision you need to make, any response you want to give, if this is a place God is saying that you want to be part of, you can come and let me know. But let us share with one another as we offer this song in declaration to Jesus, "I love to tell the story." Hymn number 444. May that become our commitment this day.